Welcome to Short Hauls, a quick video insights interview series from Heavy Duty Trucking, in partnership with our sponsors. I'm Editor-in-Chief Deborah Lockridge, and this episode is sponsored by Grote Industries. And today we're going to be talking about International Roadcheck. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance's annual Safety Blitz is a month earlier this year. It's happening May 4th through 6th. CVSA calls Roadcheck the largest targeted enforcement program on commercial motor vehicles in the world. It's held in Canada, the US, and Mexico, and they say that they inspect an average of nearly 15 trucks or buses every minute during the 72-hour period. And every year, Roadcheck focuses in on a particular area of violations. This year, there are actually two. One of them is driver hours of service, and the other is vehicle lighting. And the second one is why we've partnered with Grote Industries to bring you this video. With me today to talk about lighting and inspections and Roadcheck is Mark Blackbird. He's Director of National Fleet Sales for Grote. He's worked with Grote for nearly 30 years. He works with fleets all over the country, and he's got some great insights. Mark, welcome to HDT's Short Hauls video.
Deborah, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this session. I appreciate it.
Well, let's start off and talk a little bit about why lighting is such a significant issue when it comes to commercial vehicle enforcement.
Sure. Well, the first thing I think that we all have to keep in mind in regards to vehicle lighting, the primary purpose of it is just general safety. Sometimes we get in the weeds about different types of lighting and different opportunities with lighting, but at the end of the day, the most important facet of lighting is it's a safety feature for the operators of the equipment as well as the general public. So it's very, very safe, and I mean, safety implied. So it's a good topic. And having the roadside inspections this year targeting on lighting itself is certainly understandable. And with the CSA requirements that came about, it even has brought more attention to it.
And isn't lighting like the #1 cause of violations during these inspections?
Deborah, it is. Actually, 25% of the total infractions are lighting related. And it's the largest contributor to out of service calls, or out of the equipment being put out of service due to these infractions. And lighting, for instance, a taillight infraction carries the same implications as running a stop sign. So the CSA weighs very, very heavily on the lighting, and certainly on the taillights and all.
And I understand that if you've got a light out, that's sort of just an invitation for an inspector to start looking a little closer at the rest of the vehicle.
Sure, I've actually had conversations with a few inspectors, and it's somewhat obvious, but they have confirmed that during typical road checks, right, when a light's out, they certainly invite the vehicle to be pulled over, and that is the starting point to get into different infractions, be it the tire tread, be it brake stroke, or even a more thorough investigation of all the lighting. And it certainly can be a nuisance. And really, CSA brought all this to light back in 2010 when there was a scoreboard, per se, for the fleets, and then the reoccurring infractions started accumulating, and it really got a lot of momentum from then on.
So let's talk about how we can avoid trucks getting cited for lighting violations, whether it's during Roadcheck or any other time of the year. What are some of the most common reasons that you see for those lighting problems?
Well, I guess the most common is just infrequent light functioning or lights being out. There's a couple different facets to that, Deborah. First of all, there needs to be an active, proactive maintenance program where the lights are being reviewed at least on an annual basis during the servicing of the trailer or truck annually or more so. So when the equipment comes in for service, there needs to be a lighting inspection during the preventative maintenance periods. And that needs to check the marker lamps, the brake lamps, as well as the license lamp and side turn lamps if applicable. And then the other part of that is the pre-trip inspection for the drivers. So they would hope to be getting into a piece of equipment that's already been thoroughly vetted, per se, but they still are required for a pre-trip And one of the things that I'm hearing from the drivers and the maintenance folks is it's paramount not only to do a pre-trip, but to look at some of the areas that maybe weren't studied as often, which is like license lamps on both the truck and the trailer. It's a little harder to get in there. If it's in the middle of the day, it's not as obvious as a tail light or a brake light. But during these roadside inspections, that's certainly a targeted area.
So that's
Also, excuse me, sorry, also jiggling the power cord. When the equipment sits idle, you check it, it's one thing, but it probably makes good sense to go rattle that power cord and make sure you have good ground as well.
Sure. You know, wiring works loose. Wiring gets corroded. I understand corrosion is a big problem, sort of source problem for lighting problems.
Corrosion is a huge issue, not only with the lighting, but with the whole undercarriage of the equipment these days. Yeah, and it really makes a lot of sense to go with a good system. The interesting part of corrosion and lighting is back when we were running incandescent lights, not that many years ago, 20 plus years ago, it all kind of made sense. As your incandescent light failed, you would go to replace it, and typically the pigtail would be corroded. Well, since you were replacing the light, you typically would replace the corroded pigtail as well. Fortunately, for the quality LED lighting that there is, the lights don't fail that often at the light source. So that puts that much more emphasis on what we call the termination or the corrosion on the harness. So it's really paramount that you use a good system and one that's well mated with the light. We believe it's significant to have the same manufacturer of the light and the harness, so the interface between the two of those can be controlled and designed to fit. Many lights will fit different harnesses, but the compatibility is not nearly as robust.
Right. The connection between the tractor and the trailer, I understand that's also an area that can cause problems.
Yeah, it sure is. Those power cords have increased in their importance over the years. Back when I started 30 plus years ago in the industry, the typical power cord was firing up your marker lights and your brake lights. And it certainly did that adequately. Since then, a lot more burden has been put on those power cords. Now that's actually carrying the current for your ABS brakes. That's actually powering, in some cases, dome lights. So the importance of that power cord has increased dramatically. Therefore, it's still somewhat the same technology as 30, 40 years ago, but it's critical that you have a good quality power cord, one that has solid terminals and one that minimizes the flickering in the ground.
Now, when we were chatting before the call, you mentioned that there's one thing that you get more questions on from fleets than anything else. You can tell us about that.
Yeah, the question invariably I get when I meet with our customers in a group type session is, so tell me, how many diodes can be burned out and the light still be legal? And of course, that's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer is a little ambiguous, because the answer is, well, it depends. So it depends on the photometrics of that light, how many diodes are impacted when the failure occurs. So there's actually zonal requirements from FMVSS 108 of how much light output for various areas within the lens. And unless you have a photometer, you really can't measure if that's legal or not. If you had 64 diodes and one was burned out, it probably wouldn't be nearly as big an issue as if you had 4 diodes and one was out. That's one of the things I do recommend for the drivers during the pre-trip and in the shop as well. If there's any diodes out, you need to replace the light, because that will be something the inspectors are looking at. And some states have taken upon themselves to say as long as 2/3 of them are working or something, but the legal requirements are that it has to meet photometric specifications. So if any diodes are out, we recommend you replace the whole light.
So are inspectors out there with photometric measurements?
It doesn't exist. No.
That's what I thought.
So right. So they write you up and they explain that they don't think the light's legal. There's all sorts of variations of the legalities. If there's any light on a piece of equipment, it has to be burning, even if it's not a
Right.
legally required light. So you can even get into that with some of the inspectors that the diode is actually a light and it's not burning. It just makes a lot of sense to replace the light. And if nothing else, it's putting out less light. We know if it has fewer diodes burning. So
Absolutely. And so we're back to, the safety question.
right, and it's well known and it's even documented that there's certainly more distractions for the public out there now than years ago, and we really need to keep our equipment as visible and as safe as possible.
Well, speaking of that, visibility and safety and lighting, I understand that there's something new that inspectors may be seeing this year when it comes to trailer lighting on the back.
Deborah, there sure is, and it's exciting because I think we're going to see a lot of these enhanced strobing brake lights. Back in October, NTTC got a waiver from the government allowing brake-activated strobe lamps to be placed on the back of truck van bodies as well as trailers. Basically, this lamp that the NTTC got, either red or amber, I believe, when you hit the brake lights, it allows the strobe to kick in, letting the trailering traffic know that there's an intention to stop. And in December of last year, Grody was granted a waiver for the general public that allows truck and van bodies. The NTTC was only for tanker trailers, and Grody got a waiver for all trailers and truck bodies, allowing a strobing. And we actually have developed a 5-pulse amber strobe and then a solid red. But what you'll see, and some of the inspectors will be new to it, is there's going to be an insurgence, or there'll be many more strobing lights on the back of the equipment.
Any feeling for how much those have been adopted so far?
Very, very, very minimal, because the NTTC waiver was just in October. Prior to that, there was a private fleet in Oklahoma that had some, they've been running them for a few years. And that private fleet in Oklahoma had a 33% reduction in rear end collisions when they were running these auxiliary strobe and stop lamps. So that's what got Grody involved in developing the product we have. Deborah, interestingly enough, as this was through developmental stages, we recognized there's some impact to having constant strobes in high traffic. So, and there's some studies with the American Epileptic Society. I think it's important that not only to have constant strobes in the back of trailers, but also to have it where we have diverted over to a solid red burn after 5 strobes. So you'll be seeing those, and as you're in line during inspection, you may see a few. Hopefully the inspectors know that those are now legal.
So yeah, hopefully so. And I'm sure that by next year we'll see a lot more on the road. Really emphasizes that safety message. We talked a lot about sort of the lighting, the bulbs, the LEDs. What about the actual lens of the light? Does it get damaged? Does it get not corroded, but just lets less light through?
Yeah, actually, there's different variations of hazing and UV exposure and interaction. Yeah, the lens is an integral part of the light, and there's a lot of things that impact the lens and how it functions. UV exposure is one. We always recommend that you buy a high quality light from a branded company, because they take those things into consideration. The other thing is what are you washing your equipment with? We and other branded companies recommend just like a dish detergent, because it doesn't have a real high pH. Some of the fleets use either a wheel cleaner or aluminum cleaner, and it really makes the back end of equipment look really good, but it has dramatic impacts and starts hazing and cracking those lenses. And when that happens, it actually releases what they call the stress from molding the lens, which creates cracking. And if you have cracking, you have a moisture path. And if you have a moisture path, that's not good on a printed circuit board. And that's where you can start seeing some of these diodes, branches of diodes quit working.
I'm sure. Will a cracked lens result in a citation?
It certainly can, and it's almost guaranteed that over time it'll probably fail the light anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Well, Mark, we're about out of time. Are there any other advice that you'd like to share with fleets before we wrap up?
Oh, I guess the one that I would bring up as much as anything is when LEDs came out 30 years ago, they were so much better than the incandescent bulbs that we were all used to.
Yep.
And now over time, there's been a real attempt to take a lot of cost out of those LEDs, which is a good thing. But I think it's important that we all recognize there's a lot of difference in LEDs between the different manufacturers, and you don't really know what's underneath the lens. So don't be persuaded by some attractive warranty deal. It's critical that you buy a good quality investment grade LED that will accentuate the length of the equipment you have it on. Don't be sometimes you get what you pay for, and quality comes at a slight cost. So I run into a lot of situations where people are thinking all LEDs are the same. They're just not. You get what you pay for.
Right. And these days uptime is so important. That's you could really end up losing all that money you saved pretty quickly with just one out of service violation.
The first time you have to apply labor to it, especially with a larger operation, right? If it's an individual that has one trailer, then it's probably not as cumbersome. But if you're running thousands of trailers, when you have that downtime, it certainly far exceeds the acquisition benefit you got by an inexpensive.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thanks, Mark. Again, we've been speaking with Mark Blackford with Grote Industries. This episode of Short Hauls was produced in partnership with Grote as our sponsor. Check back here for future episodes of this new HDT video interview series.